This little snippet here is talking about diagramming techniques. Now, the purpose of these little snippets is to show you that there are a variety of techniques that you can use. It's not going to teach you how to use each of the diagramming techniques, but to show you that overall these are useful. You may have questions and may want to dive in further on some of these. You may not use any of them at all, but these are 10 of the more popular techniques. First thing is to understand that we use techniques like this to make sense of things all the time and have been way before computers. So people look at methods and they like words like methodology, which is a really fancy word, doesn't actually, again, mean anything useful here. But just think about something simple like a book. Now, this is a book I bought off the internet by Abby Covert. It's about a $10 book. It has really good diagramming techniques in it. And the really cool part about it is that she starts off and says, just imagine if we gave you this book by throwing you a bunch of pages. If the pages weren't numbered, that would be a little hard to put this together. We also put things in alphabetical order in the index so that if you need to look them up, we can find them. We've got maps, diagrams, all sorts of things. We arrange things with the intent to communicate information. We can't actually make the information, however. That is for everybody else to figure out. So first of all, I'm going to classify the components that go into this toolkit that she uses here. An object is a thing. Great, it's a button in this case, but it could also be a business process that you're looking at or something else along that. Interface, something where user does something that affects the thing. Location, where is that thing in point in time? Journey, where does that thing go as it follows whatever story it is we're trying to describe. Structure, how are those things related to other things? System. System is a series of structures that we've pulled together to actually get something to work together. All together, these comprise ecosystems. So these are things you can use as objects of your diagramming techniques. Now, the first one is called a block diagram. You can look at this. You've seen them before. It depicts objects and how their attributes interrelate to help describe a concept. By the way, all of these examples are pizza, so hopefully you've had lunch or dinner already, because if not, you'll be thinking about pizza by the end of the few little sections here. Anyway, you can see the pizza bit, right? It's pizza, we have crust. We do thick, Chicago or New York style. Then there's a whole series of toppings that you can put. And then there's the service of the pizza. Are we going to have it delivered? Are we going to set it for pickup to go? Or are we going to eat here in the restaurant? So again, a way of classifying the various components of the information. Here's a flow diagram. Flow diagram outlines the steps in a process, sometimes including conditions that are in there that allow us to go in and describe how the flow occurs. So on this path, right, it depends on what I'm doing, but I order the pizza online and then I say delivery yes, well, and I have to wait for the doorbell. Or if I say no delivery, then I have to drive. Either way, whether it's a doorbell or a drive, right, I have to pay and then I get pizza and I eat the pizza. So again, very, very straightforward techniques. Really, the problem we've done in systems here is that we insist that there's a rule and a series of grammars and make this very technical. The only thing that matters is, do people understand what it is you're doing? And if you can put it on a single piece of paper and make everybody come to the same understanding, then you have achieved your analysis goal there. A Gantt chart, some of you that are involved in projects will understand this. It just describes how various processes relate to each other over time. So again, people, tasks, and time are interrelated here. 7 p.m. I'm hungry. 7:25 I'm starving. Okay. At work at 7 p.m. I commute. I get home. I answered the door. Right. If I was smart, I ordered pizza, and the door. I get to the door at the same time as the pizza gets to the door. So then we deliver. Quadrant diagram. We looked at this in one of the other charts where we said quadrants are critically important on all that. Key here is, what's the exact, types of things that I'm differentiating the top and the bottom and the left and the right if we look at those. So in this case, expensive pizza, cheap pizza, thin crust, thick crust. Okay, if that's your world, you can classify it pretty well, and that tells you which pizza place you want to go to solve your hunger craving. Again, I'm not saying you're going to do this for pizzas, but certainly for what we're looking at in the problem set, it will be very interesting. Venn diagrams, again, showing overlapping concepts or objects. I showed in one of the other videos the overlap between BI and analytics, because nobody can really tell the difference between them. So some people Don't quite know how things relate. Well, if I can have a movie and pizza, it means I can have Friday night at home, right? That may be a very good thing if you have, or you may do something completely different. Swim lane diagrams. Again, look here, this is how multiple players interact to complete a task. So we may have a pizza eater and a customer service rep and a cook and a driver. And of course, you can see there's a lot of things that need to happen to get a pizza delivered to you. Hierarchy diagrams, just showing again how the objects relate to each other from a more formalized set. Now, let's take a little bit of a break on this and talk about systems for just a minute. We talk about systems, we talk about hardware, software, people, processes, and data. And one of the things that's most interesting around here is that we teach all of these things as if they're all the same. It turns out data is hugely important relative to those and growing massively compared to the others. So a little chart I like to use. Every minute of every day in the year 2017, Netflix streamed almost 70,000 hours of videos. There were almost 500,000 tweets every minute of the entirety of 2017. Every minute of every day of 2017 saw 15 million texts, 3.5 million Google searches, and 100 million email spams. Well, these are very, very large numbers, and we have to pay a little bit more attention to data than we've been paying in the past. Mind map. Some of you may use these already. There's some very, very good techniques for doing mind maps out there. Again, free software, but you can draw it in PowerPoint. It's okay. The idea is it doesn't talk about a specific hierarchy or sequence. So it allows you to go in and just capture things very, very grammatically in that sense. Toolbox components, a schematic. All right, this gives us the ability to look at all sorts of things. Here's a pizza. We're looking at it, and what we're looking at here is this one needs sort of two perspectives. All right, somebody says, is that a pizza? Well, if you take toppings, cheese, tomato sauce, and crust and put it together in the right order, maybe. But again, different tools for different techniques. Finally, a journey map here. All right, how am I going to get the pizza? Well, I'm outside. I'm waiting for the bus to go home. The bus takes me to the pizza place. I order the pizza, get off at the stop, walk to the door, unlock, hear the doorbell, eat the pizza, right? Again, all the steps that somebody goes through as they are experiencing the entire process of satisfying their hunger for pizza in this case. Now, this last one isn't necessarily so much of a technique, but it does talk about things that we're looking at specifically. Ontologies means the way in which we group things conceptually. Everybody has an ontological framework. The question is, does yours match the one that you're talking to? So you may have one, but it may be really, really very messy. What I'm showing on the right here is the grocery store, and you can see there's all sorts of things. Bakery goods, canned goods, coffee and tea are probably in the same place, but not the same place as the vegetables because they would be really a different concept. Sometimes they're completely nonsensical, and you've probably seen that as well. Here's another ontological concept for a movie, which says that you're going to probably have a director, and some actors that are involved in that particular process. Again, it's a diagramming technique, but it's only really for understanding your environment on all this. Now, the reason this is critically important is because what's implemented in organizations turns out oftentimes to be a little bit different from the way the organizations envision them in the first place. And I'm going to tell a story here from my colleague Michael Gorman, who I've written a book with and done work with all over the years for a long time. He worked for an organization called the MITRE Corporation. And Michael had been trying to get an appointment with an executive because he'd been trying to get the executive to validate a specific diagram, which is one of the things we've talked about here. He had a relationship between a couple things. And the specifics were, can a project be owned by multiple departments, or is a project only ownable by one department? Now that's an interesting question. The executive looked at the technology diagram and said, I don't have time for technical issues. And Michael said, well, this isn't a technology issue, it's a policy issue. And the executive, I don't deal with technology. Don't go away and don't bother me, Michael, right? Well, Michael's a fairly persistent guy, and he tries a couple more times, but the executive gets nowhere, but he keeps looking for an answer, meets the technician who is actually implementing the system as, oh, yeah, multiple department owners can own multiple projects. In other words, a project can be owned by multiple departments. If it's built that way in the database, people will find ways of doing it. So the next time he gets on the elevator and meets that executive, the executive says, hey, aren't you going to bother me about that technical issue that you had? And Michael says, no. The techies described how they implement it. Projects, in fact, do have multiple department owners. The executive says, no, that's wrong. That's not corporate policy. And Michael says, it doesn't matter what you say. It's what's happening out there. Because this is a perfect example of where the data is an example of the executed policy of the organization. And you need to find out what that is. And these diagramming techniques can be very helpful in order to do that. I'm going to give you one more technique on this particular video. It's one they stopped teaching a long time ago, which is sort of weird. I don't understand why they wouldn't teach it, but it's what we call a context diagram. Now, you know the Serenity Prayer, right? Give me the wisdom to tell the difference between the things I can change and the things I can't change, right? Well, if I say the IRS is part of this system, there's only one circumstance under which the IRS would be part of the internal system that can be changed, and that's if I'm Congress rewriting the tax code. For 99% of the time, the IRS is going to be outside of this system because it's not something we can affect. And if the IRS says this is what happens, that's what goes on. Even this context diagram is not well explained, understood, or utilized in most problem-solving activities, which is what we're going to try to look at today. So I hope that helps you get an idea of some things. When you start to use these techniques, draw them yourself, see what happens. But if you find the diagram isn't doing what you wanted, then you need to go back and perhaps try a different diagram. There's lots of stuff on the web, and of course I'm available to you guys always to answer specific questions about whether this is useful technique for solving this particular aspect of the problem that we are solving.